Hello there. Welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world. And so much love to each and every one of you. How are you doing? I do hope you're doing remarkably well. And boy, have I got a lovely story for you tonight. But before we get started, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Click the notification bell and the thumbs up. And let's get started with tonight's story. Dear Sarah, and all your lovely listeners, I sat there crying on my bed, with tears of great regret. I had messed up big time. Why did I get so embroiled in such sticky situations? Why was I so easily drawn into such dysfunctional relationships that in the long term would never ever work out? I was a woman that was currently in a same-sex relationship. This was why I was in such a state, because I knew this farce of a relationship could never realistically work, and would have to sooner or later come to an end. And I had no way of knowing how I was going to get Candace to understand that I wanted out. The woman did not know the meaning of the words, "It's not working out," I had told Candace over and over again. So much so that I was tragically beginning to sound rather like a broken record. Candace would guffaw with laughter, never taking me seriously for a moment. She would give me a rather amused wink and say she believed I needed more time to get in touch with my true authentic self, to find out who I really was. In truth, what I really needed was to end this relationship with her, and the sooner the better. But I knew I was stuck between a rock and a hard place, because getting through to Candace was like getting a stone through a sieve. It wasn't happening. The woman didn't want to hear any inconvenient truths that did not suit her agenda. The tears unabashedly spilled down my cheeks. I had to wipe them away. I sobbed like I had never done before, like a newborn baby, as my mother's sagacious words rang into my head, and I knew I needed to give them swift attention. My mother had warned me about Candace and her extreme fixation over me. "Sweetheart, you need to get away from this woman. She's obsessed with you. Obsession is a very dangerous thing, you know. You hear stories in the media, don't you, of dreadful things that happen to people because of an obsessed partner. You've got to make Candace realize that you need to end the relationship." I knew my mother was right, but she had no comprehension of just how unreasonable Candace was. She twisted everything to her own advantage. It was close to impossible to stand up to the woman. Our relationship had thankfully never been physical, as I judiciously claimed that I was not ready for intimacy of any kind. Candace had thankfully respected that. She had been long-suffering and patient with me, reassuring me that we could take things very slowly. There was, of course, one big problem with us. I was not gay. Indeed, I never had been. I didn't know how I had allowed this woman to persuade me that I was gay. Although, to be absolutely fair, bisexual was the word she used to describe my sexual identity. She seemed to know more about me than I knew about myself. It sounds like an impossible scenario to find yourself entangled in. But believe me, I'm not the first, nor will I be the last person that would find themselves in such a sticky situation, like a bee caught up in a big vat of honey. I assure you, other women like myself have fallen into this insidious trap, like a little girl who's a tomboy as a child, and for a while falsely believes she should have been born a boy. And later on she soon realizes she was just going through a rather confused period in her life. In my case, I have never been remotely confused about my own sexual identity. But the trouble is, I'd never met the likes of Candace Warren before. The woman was incredibly persuasive, very manipulative, and for a long time she had me question my own sexual orientation, when I was so obviously heterosexual. And I believe she knew it all along, but Candace was resolutely determined to flip the pancake to a side that suited her best, and to use her artful skills to convince the pancake itself that it was a blueberry rather than a plain, if you get my drift. In truth, Candace was the kind of woman that could sell ice to an Eskimo, so that the Eskimo might falsely believe that his stash of snow that surrounded him wherever he turned was in serious short supply. "Can you not feel the attraction between us?" she said to me, peering at me through her besotted, animated brown eyes, and reaching to grab my hand over the restaurant table that was covered in a starched white linen tablecloth, and the candle that was flickering on the table made her devoted puppy dog stare she was giving me all the more pronounced. She made me feel as if I was the most beautiful, beloved woman in the entire world. No one had ever made me feel this adored or cherished before, and in truth I liked the feeling very much, especially given that of late I'd been terribly, terribly lonely. I guess having all the attention lavished on me made me feel fully appreciated, special and validated, as for a while my self-esteem and confidence seemed to have taken a nosedive down the drainpipe. It was like Candace was wiping all that negative self-doubt away and making me feel good about myself again. Candace explained how it was in her knowledgeable book. The way I see it, our attraction is very subtle. The sparks you find between a man and a woman are very different to the sparks between two women. There's no subtlety in the former. Believe me, I know all about that, she said with a contemptuous scoff, as if male and female relationships were outmoded and extremely stale. There's definitely something special between us. I can feel it. Is there? I said in bemusement, giving Candace a blank, rather vacuous stare. I really wanted to believe her, but felt no attraction to Candace whatsoever. I liked her personality, of course I did. But how did I tell her that without appearing rude and insensitive? This was an uncomfortable conversation that I found rather difficult to handle. I had never been on the receiving end of a woman's affections. It was a whole new experience for me that threw me right out of my comfort zone. It would have been a lot easier to give a man the brush off, but I couldn't do the same to Candace, for reasons I cannot explain. With her I remained a little guarded and hesitant. "Oh, definitely," she insisted. "You and I, Toya, can make the entire world rock. We were meant to be together forever and ever," she said, throwing her arms up in the air in a dramatic gesture that was so funny it made me giggle. "You're crazy," I said, shaking my head. "You're really, really crazy." "No, I'm not crazy," Candace laughed, with a big beam on her face. "About you, maybe. But crazy, absolutely not. I know exactly what I want, and when I see for it, I go for it. And you, Toya, you are all I want. I mean, who would want to be with a man? If they can have me," she teased, giving me a big wink. But I knew beneath the humour she was being deadly serious. "I mean, look at that loser of a boyfriend you dated for 4 whole years. And the abysmal way he treated you. You deserve so much better, Toya. Just so you know, I would never ever treat you like that. I mean, how could I ever do that to someone like you? That scoundrel treated you with such disrespect. It's disgusting." "You're right about that. He was a loser," I agreed. "I seriously regret dating him for 4 years. But are you not forgetting one thing here, Candace? I'm not gay." At this point, I tried to avoid Candace's steely gaze. This conversation was embarrassing and made me feel rather self-conscious. Candace threw her head back in laughter, which was something she often did when I made a comment. "Oh, I think you are, Toya. I think you are gay," she said, giving me a cheeky wink. "It's all right to deny it, you know. You come from a strictly religious conservative background. And let's not kid, Catholics, well, they can be set in their ways, can't they? Doggedly set in their ways. So your being bisexual is not something that is easy to admit to yourself. But I promise you, you are. I can tell that you are. I should know, because I'm gay myself. And the difference between you and me is that I've embraced my sexual identity, but you're so afraid of yours, so you've been in denial all this time." "You think I'm bisexual?" I asked her, looking at her in abject astonishment. "But I've never been remotely attracted to women." "That's what you're saying to yourself all the time, Toya, over and over again. That's what you're trying to convince yourself. But think about us. We have an incredible friendship, don't you think?" "But of course we do," I agreed. "I value our friendship very much, Candace. I'm very glad to have met you. You make me laugh a lot. We're good girlfriends and as close as sisters, but lovers definitely not. I don't mean to be unkind, but the idea is ludicrous for me." "There you go again, off on a tangent," said Candace, laughing, shaking her head vigorously, and rolling her eyes in mock exasperation, as if I was a little kid, talking nonsense and failing to see any sense. "I can see the denial with you is deeply entrenched. Let's just say, Toyah, forget about the romantic side of things between us for a moment. I hope you can fully appreciate that every good relationship starts first from a firm foundation of being great friends. You and I are a team, Toyah, and we're going to make this relationship work." "We are?" I asked, sounding rather doubtful. "Of course we are. We can take things very slowly if you like. The one thing about me, Toyah, is I'm a patient person. I get it. I really do. I know you're desperately shy, very demure, and I understand that. Furthermore, you've never been with a woman before. It's new, uncharted, unexplored territory for you. But there's no pressure on my part. On the physical side of a relationship, intimacy is the least important thing at this stage of the game, as far as I'm concerned. And besides, I'd never make you do something that would make you feel uncomfortable." I squirmed with embarrassment, my face turning a shade of pink, probably the colour of a peony. I hated with a passion talking about intimate things. Once again, Candace rolled her head back with laughter. "You're so cute, Toyah. Why, I do believe you're blushing. You really are old-fashioned, aren't you? You're a bit straight-laced. And guess what? I kind of like it. These days people are so brash, are they not? But you're refreshing, Toyah, naive and whimsical, and I love that about you," she said, clapping her hands in delight. "I'm not blushing," I said defensively. "I'm just a little hot in this restaurant, that's all," I said, fanning the air with my hands. "It's a bit stuffy in here, don't you think?" Candace laughed. "The only heat in here, Toyah, is coming directly from you. You're hot, girl. The best part of it all is you're blindly oblivious to how attractive you really are. That's a rare, treasured quality to find in a lady. Some of the girls I've met think they're all that, and that's such a big turn-off for me. Let's just say when people are full of themselves and think that you should be grateful that they've graced you with their presence, that makes me want to throw up, because their vanity knows no bounds. You see it all over TikTok. Look at me, I'm so hot, that kind of thing. But you, Toyah, you're humble, and you're sweet, and that's so lovely." "That's kind of you to say," I said. "But the truth is I haven't got anything to be vain about. I would hardly describe myself as an oil painting." "You see, that's what I'm talking about," said Candace. "You're gorgeous, Toyah, and you failed to see it." She leaned forward over the table to get my attention. She jiggled the ice in her cocktail glass and took a slurping sip, placing the glass down on the table directly and staring at me with wide eyes. "What?" I said. Candace lowered her voice discreetly, almost as if she was worried that people dining at other tables were eavesdropping on our conversation. "I've just had a brilliant idea," she whispered, waving her arm around excitedly, as if she just had found the answer to a quiz question. "I think we should move in together, don't you?" This time I was shaking the ice in my own cocktail glass and hurriedly took a sip. "Move in together?" I said nervously, "but—" Candace put her hand up in the air to stop me from saying anything more. "No buts, Toyah. Come on, this is definitely going to work. It'll be brilliant. It makes so much sense. You're living in a clapped-out apartment, aren't you? Where more things are broken than are actually working. You're paying for the luxury of living in such a dump. I don't mean to be unkind, but I was really shocked when you showed me around your apartment. I couldn't believe you were living in a place like that. You deserve better, Toyah, much better. It makes perfect sense, doesn't it? You and I, we get on like a house on fire. We've become very close friends. So why don't we move in together? Let's do it." I raised a brow. "What are you talking about, Candace?" I asked. Candace chuckled. "You are slow on the uptake, Toyah. Honestly, haven't you heard a single word I've just said? I want you to move in with me, of course. Friends do it all the time, don't they? Even when they're not romantically inclined. like I hope to be with you one day. Think about it for a second. I've got a stunning apartment in Manhattan that my father bought for me. It's inherited money from old wealth. Back in the day, my family were big into coal. Let me take care of you, Toyah. I'd be honoured to enjoy the privilege. If I had my way, I'd wrap you up so carefully in tissue paper to keep the big bad world away from impregnating you with its filth and debauchery. You are so precious, Toyah. You're a treasured jewel. I hope you realise that. Your kind only comes along once in a lifetime. I know a great thing when I see it. Unlike that very foolish ex-boyfriend of yours, who was a prize idiot to let you go. He didn't see a good thing when it was staring him brazenly in the face. I saw your star quality from the first time I laid eyes on you. I bet your ex-boyfriend is crying now, but the milk has already been spilt, and it's too late for him to mop up the mess. She reached forward to grab one of my bouncy dark red curls in her hand, and sighed appreciatively. You have the most gorgeous hair colour, Toyah. Do you know that? She said, staring at my hair, as if it was all but spun gold. Do you know how many women would literally kill to get this colour out of a bottle? But yours is all natural. And with your flawless porcelain fair skin, it makes you look like a princess. You have that pre-Raphaelite aristocratic look about you, Toyah. Has anyone told you that before? Well, yes, I've been described as pre-Raphaelite, but no one's ever called me aristocratic looking before. It's a pity my bank balance doesn't reflect my so-called physical status, I teased. So what do you say, girl? Are you going to move in with me or not? Please say yes, Toyah. I could feel Candace's hopeful eyes boring into mine. I knew without a shadow of a doubt that this woman was smitten by me. I had enjoyed a couple of relationships in my past, but I'd never ever experienced a relationship where the person in question was a woman, and the woman was fixated on me in the way Candace was. I will say at this point a red flag was blowing in my mind, as if warning me that I needed to be on my guard. So very gingerly I applied as much cautionary tact as I possibly could to bring closure to Candace's wild idea that I knew would never work. How could it? I wasn't gay. Yes, I liked her. She was a great friend. But there was no more to our relationship than that. I didn't think it would be fair to lead her up the garden path and give her false hope. I needed to establish boundaries now, before things got wildly out of hand. Candace was absolutely right about my shabby apartment. It was far from glamorous, but at least it was mine. Living with her, no matter how glamorous and appealing her apartment was, didn't seem like a judicious thing to do. A little voice in my head was whispering, "Don't do it, don't do it." "I'm not sure that's a good idea, Candace," I said apprehensively, twisting my napkin in my hand rather nervously, making some curious shapes with the starched linen fabric. It was a useful ploy to adopt, in avoiding meeting Candace's eyes, that was studying me pleadingly. We were surrounded by the pleasing sounds of a busy, chirpy, upbeat restaurant that was doing a roaring trade on that Friday evening. I could hear the clanging of cutlery, the chinking of glasses, the background noises of people chatting away and laughing merrily at their tables. The waiters were swathed in very smart black and white uniforms. They seemed to glide seamlessly across the floors, almost as if they were skating. They were carrying trays in their hands containing exotic, colourful cocktails and white plates piled high with steaming pastas. The delicious mouth-watering savoury aromas that wafted around the restaurant were enough to make anyone salivate. I could smell melted cheese, tomato and garlic. This was my absolute all-time favourite Italian restaurant, where they served authentic Italian food that you'd likely find in Tuscany or Rome. The owners were an Italian couple from Naples, and the food they presented was the best I'd ever tasted or eaten. There is no doubt in my mind that Italians knew how to cook. My tongue was titillated with all the savoury flavours of basil, garlic, tomato and butter. I was feeling satisfied with my gastronomic experience. Since I'd been spending time with Candace, she had extravagantly taken me out to the most wonderful places, always insisting on treating me to everything, and when I offered to pay she'd not hear of it. Even my ex-boyfriends had not showered me with the fragrant confetti of such attentive and devoted affections before, and I rarely felt pampered by Candace in every regard. She had brought me wonderful gifts, flowers and chocolates, and had spoilt me in a way that had been more than just a pleasure. "I get it, Toyah. I really do," said Candace seriously. "As I was saying to you earlier, I appreciate living with a woman is new territory for you." She lowered her voice as she became conscious of a couple at the next table, looking at us inquiringly. The woman pulled a face when Candace caressed my hand. She was old school quite clearly, and not remotely comfortable with seeing two people of the same sex being affectionate towards each other. In this day and age, people were becoming more comfortable with same-sex relationships, but there was always the occasional type that couldn't get their head around what they considered to be a complete anomaly. Candace continued, "I know it's intimidating to move in with a woman when you've never had a relationship with a woman before. But as I said, we can take things very slowly, little steps. Rome wasn't built in a day, as my mother always used to say. For a start, you can have your own bedroom suite in my apartment. We can live together like roommates in the beginning and see where we go to from there. We can allow things to blossom between us naturally. There's a season for everything, Toyah, as there will probably be for us. We've got a lifetime we can spend together, so we can take things at a turtle's pace if you like." I guess I agreed to finally move in with Candace. As for one thing, the woman had plenty of money. The apartment she owned was luxurious, and I was struggling with paying the rent for a shoddy apartment. Candace had insisted I could live with her rent-free, so looking a gift horse in the mouth seemed rather foolish. I had been so lonely living on my own in that run-down apartment that I had been renting out in a seedy part of the city. So living with Candace was an upgrade from quite literally rags to riches. Yes, there were big problems in sight, obstacle courses to overcome, and roadblocks. For a start, I wasn't attracted to Candace like that, but she seemed insistent that whether we had a relationship or not, that I should move in. She said we'd see where it went. I do know that when I was in her company, she lit up my world like a bright Christmas tree. She was flamboyant, hilarious and fun to be around, and it seemed a hell of a lot better than being on my own. I reminded myself of how lonely I'd been, so living with Candace would be lots of fun. She did say she wanted to be friends first, so we could get to know each other better. There was no pressure for us to be romantically involved yet, if ever. "At least give us a chance, Toyah," Candace had said. "I admit there's a chance it might not work out. We can live together as friends and see where that goes to," she said nonchalantly. "You can't say fairer than that, can you?" "But I'm not gay," a voice whispered into my mind. How could this ever work? Furthermore, what would my mother say about all this? She was a devout Catholic, and the idea of two women living together, in her book, was a cardinal sin. Yes, my mother did live in the 21st century. She knew how things had changed over the years, and same-sex relationships were no longer regarded as taboo. Having said that, my mother was extremely religious. I knew she'd be absolutely appalled if Candace was proved right, and there was an unexplored part of myself that refused to admit I was gay. I suspected a woman like my mother would not relish learning that about her only daughter. I could imagine her increasing her Hail Marys if that were the case. Candace had told me she could tell I was in denial about my sexuality. Could she be right about that? Surely not. She was telling me that I'd grown up in a tight conservative background where I was denying the truth of who I really was, for fear of ridicule, for being judged and the condemnation that I believed I might be subjected to from both of my parents. Yet I doubted that very much. I do know when I sat there in the Italian restaurant and finally surrendered to her artful persuasions and said, "All right, we'll give it a go, but as long as we're just friends. I'm not ready for a relationship yet, and I'm not sure if I am actually gay. That's a big problem for me, Candace." Candace had clapped her hands in glee, so loudly in fact that many of the restaurant customers had stopped short what they were doing to stare at us, as if wondering what Candace was so incredibly excited about. She looked like someone who'd just heard they'd won the lottery. Candace had ordered all the dessert items on the menu to celebrate the fact that I was now moving in with her. Our table had been covered with a sumptuous affair of creme carlotta, limoncello soufflé, all manner of delicious Italian cakes, gelato of every kind, from pistachio to caramel, and of course the Italian all-round favourite tiramisu. I think I must have rolled out of that restaurant like a great big fat sausage dog. The very next day I'd moved in with Candace. I had been given a lavish, stunning bedroom and bathroom suite, all of my own, so I could thoroughly enjoy my own privacy. It had been sumptuously decorated, with plenty of savoir-faire and oodles of style. It was a whole lot bigger than my entire apartment that I'd been renting, put together. It was like a luxurious suite you would find in an ornate hotel. It had an oak wood sleigh bed, a king-size one at that, 2 matching side tables, a glass wrought iron table surrounded by some really glamorously attired upholstered chairs, and a sofa. There was a large self-contained cabinet that contained a television and its own little inbuilt refrigerator. There was a walk-in closet with so much room for storing your clothes, and a luxurious bathroom suite with fluffy towels and a bath so big it could possibly give a whale a beauty treatment and some barnacle removal therapy. It was as good as a self-contained flat, with breathtaking views over the street, where I could observe all the comings and goings of the vibrant up-and-coming neighbourhood. You could leave the apartment and take a walk down the road, passing the most stunning-looking brownstone apartments, to reach the most fabulous restaurants sporting trendy avant-garde menus. There were coffee shops and vintage boutiques. What was there not to like about living in this opulent, bustling part of Manhattan? Maybe I was using Candace and taking full advantage of her kindness. Some might say I was. One advantage of being with her meant I was never alone. She filled in the empty silences and awkward gaps. She made me smile when life seemed to lack sparkle, like a bottle of bubbly that's gone very flat. I mean, I'd heard that heterosexual women in prison often become lovers when they are not that way inclined. They are lonely, and many of them are never going to get out of their incarceration. These female prisoners manage to make things work between themselves, even when they are so obviously heterosexual, and even without physical attraction being involved in their relationship. But I doubted I could do that with Candace. It just felt all wrong. I had liked Candace in a way that you would enjoy the company of your best friend. Growing up as an only child, I had never experienced the privilege of having a best friend before. Even when I was at junior and senior high, I failed to develop any close friendships with other girls. Maybe this was because I was not an extrovert by nature and struggled to make close friendships. I was always the one that would sit in the back of the classroom, hoping I'd never get noticed. Candace had come along in a fragile moment of my life, when she'd shone a bright, cheerful light on a dark, lonely place and brought a smile to my face. I was in a vulnerable place at the time when I'd met Candace. I had left university a couple of years back and was working in the city with an accountancy firm that did not pay too great for the junior staff that were thumbling around at the bottom of the ladder, desperately trying to ascend it. When I was at university, I discovered to my horror that the boyfriend I'd been dating for over 4 years, William Chapnell, who everyone affectionately called Will, had been cheating on me for 2 of those 4 years, which was a big, cold, wretched slap on the face. How had I not seen through the signs, smelt a lingering whiff of perfume on his person, or observed a lipstick stain on the cuff of his collar, perhaps? How had I not seen through the collage of exaggerated excuses that he regularly made towards me as to why he couldn't see me that night? How had I failed to notice all the cracks that were beginning to develop in our relationship? Will was very good at deception, and he turned on the charm like a light switch, and so I was easily fooled. I had put down his apathetic insouciance towards me over the last couple of years as Will working hard to get his degrees, but in truth, all I had been was gormlessly naive, as my mother was later quick to point out to me. My mother had been grossly appalled when I had told her that Will's affair had been going on for 2 whole years without my knowledge. She threw her hands around her face in exasperation, stared at me with wide, incredulous eyes, and said, "Toya, am I hearing right? Do you mean to tell me you didn't even know that Will was cheating on you for so long? The signs were everywhere, love, as plain as day. I cannot for the life of me believe you did not see them. I didn't know, Mum. I had no idea he was cheating on me, I blubbered, feeling my face reddening with shame. I had felt so humiliated to be cheated on. It had made me feel worthless, as if I'd meant nothing to Will. But it was even more earth-shattering to have become aware of his treacherous duplicity and betrayal. My mother had taken me lovingly into her arms and said, "You poor, poor thing, sweetheart. You're going to have to be more savvy and streetwise, my dear. You really are. People can take full advantage of you when you're naive like this. You're far too trustworthy for your own good. It's a dog-eat-dog world out there, I'm afraid to say. It can be brutal, you know. I know me and your father have had a rock-solid relationship, and you've been positively influenced by our code of ethics. But I hasten to say not everybody is like us, and you need to realize that. Out there in the big wide world, it's a slippery slope. You're going to have your wits about you all the time. Not all men are reliable and faithful like your father is, you know. You need to understand that. You only have to look at some of those dreadful dating websites they have these days. It would seem the ulterior motive is for men and women to meet up for a meaningless, rather shallow romp in the hay. None of them seem to want long-standing, enduring relationships. It's dreadfully sad, an awful shame, but it's what is happening these days to this young generation. And my guess is that some of those people are going to end up very lonely indeed. But how could Will do this to me, Mum? Why didn't he just tell me he loved somebody else? I could have dealt with that. Yes, it would have hurt like hell. Yes, I would be devastated. But at least I'd have my dignity still intact. My mother shook her head sadly. None of this is your fault, Toya. You need to realize that. Don't take things so personally. Let's just say Will Schaponi is a coward, a fool, and probably a narcissist. Maybe he wanted to have two women on the go at the very same time, adoring him, to stroke his ever-so-inflated ego. I wouldn't be surprised at all. That would support my narcissistic theory about him. You were far too good for the likes of him. In truth, when we met him for the first time and you brought him here for dinner, don't you remember? I recall thinking he was very slippery and sly. He did turn on the charm and buttered me up, but I saw through it all, Toya. I never liked him from the word go. There was something about him that made me distinctly uneasy. I was clandestinely hoping the relationship would self-combust all on its own. Instead, you ended up going out with him for 4 long years. You seemed dreadfully serious about him. I did have sleepless nights that one day you would get married to him, and he would do the dirty on you. You see, when you're a mother, love, you can't interfere with your children's choices when it comes to their boyfriends. Sometimes you have to sit back watching your child put her hand onto a hot plate of a stove, and you can do nothing to stop it. I had to let you learn from your own mistakes, did I not? You did? I said, looking aghast. Why didn't you tell me you felt this way about him, Mum? I thought you liked him. Because, love, you wouldn't like it if I told you I didn't like your boyfriend, would you? You'd probably become very defensive. So on my part, it was better to say nothing than interfere. Besides, I had a feeling the relationship would run its course in the end. But it took a long time to do that. I had no idea you felt this way about Will, Mum. I'm quite shocked to hear you say all this. Well, all I'm saying, love, is you deserve so much better. Let's just say you need a man who treats you right, like your father does me. Be glad that it's over between the two of you. That's all I can say. Better you find out his true colours than after you've walked down the aisle with him. I'm very thankful that never happened. Your mother's absolutely right, my father interjected. The man's a bloody fool. That's all I can say. And I'm not being biased because you're my daughter, Toya. If you ask me, you're well rid. Respect and trust, as your mother is saying, in a relationship is crucial. And if it's lacking, you move on.
Will was cheating on you, and once a cheat, always a cheat, I say. Like your mother, I never warmed to the man. There was something that wasn't right about him, but I couldn't work out what it was. I guess it was a natural instinct on my part that he'd end up treating you badly. It goes to show that instincts should never be disregarded or overlooked. Because I was right on the money about that man.
But I loved him, Dad. I really did. I thought he felt exactly the same way about me.
If he's been cheating on you for 2 years, love, you have your answer, said my father. Will never respected you. I could never behave like that towards your mother. She is my world. I want to protect her, and I want to protect you, because I love the both of you. That kind of love is loyal and devoted. It does not accommodate betrayal or dishonor. Because it cannot. I know it's hard to feel rejection, love, but I'm afraid we all have to experience it at one point in time. Growing up, I was ditched by a few girls myself. But I guess I got the big prize in the end, because I got to be with your mother. I never looked back. I count my blessings I never ended up with any of those other girls, as you will one day when you're a happily married woman. You'll look back and say, what did I ever see in Will? Thank God we never got married. What your father is saying, love, is that when you meet the right man, and it's meant to be, you will know it. So there we are. That is the end of part 1. Part 2 is tomorrow night. I look forward to you joining me then. Until next time, goodbye and good night.